You're listening to the Sales Tax People podcast. In this episode, we dive into why some states require you to provide your Social Security number when you're registering for a sales tax license. We also talk about who is accountable when a company screws up sales tax. Please don't ignore it, my friends. Just don't ignore sales tax. And if you find yourself in a sales tax audit, this episode gives you a good survival guide to deal with auditors. Enjoy. We have seen more than ever the question come up of, why the states require a Social Security number, and not just, of course, whose Social Security number are we talking about? All right. When you go through these registrations, some of the states require a Social Security number from an officer or owner. What are our thoughts on why the state's requiring that?
Well, when you get registered with the Department of Revenue, one of the most important key factors that the state wants is to know who ultimately is responsible to ensure that the business is in compliance, right? You're a registered taxpayer in the state, and the business is collecting, remitting tax, and the state wants to know, okay, who in this business is ultimately going to be responsible to ensure that the taxes are being collected, and what's being collected gets remitted to the state. And so they do that by asking and requiring of you to provide personal identifying information that they can use to specifically make sure that it's you and you are who you say you are. And one of the more common, especially in the U.S., forms of identification is your Social Security number. In the state of California, they require your driver's license, a physical or a scanned copy of your driver's license. For our foreign sellers or remote sellers that are, in Poland or overseas, not in the U.S., they obviously don't have a Social Security number. And so there's a couple of alternatives that the states are continuing to expand and grow in accepting, and one of those being an ITIN or a passport number, some foreign form of identification. And that's, again, just to make sure that you are who you say you are, you're a legitimate business, and also that they can, reach out to you as the owner or officer of the company to ensure that your business is in compliance.
As this conversation comes up, can be a big concern with employees that are responsible party, and then owners or officers that are, listed as the responsible party and in fact provide the Social Security number. And, our message to those folks is always one where, look, we're having this conversation. You guys are taking a proactive approach here to be compliant. So how much of a concern do you really have that you're going to be stuck with any, responsibility and ultimately liability? And the answer is zero or little to none, at least as long as the company is compliant, right? The state's looking for someone to be on the hook if that company is non-compliant and unwilling to cooperate with any, circumstance, typically an audit that the state's performing, and the company either is not responding or can't be found. And, and even in cases of, just gross negligence or even fraud, the state needs to have someone on the hook that they can go after, because the tax never dies, right? It doesn't just go away. So they need to have someone on the hook for that. And again, there's only a real concern if you as a company are not actually compliant.
The responsible party aspect of this is important in the sense that you're acting as an agent of the state, right? The state's entrusting you with responsibility to comply with their sales and use tax law. This is where I think people get really frustrated when they begin to understand that they have tax responsibilities outside of a jurisdiction where they conduct their business operations. I think it's just a really good reminder, again, for everybody out there that sales tax post-Wayfair is based on where your customers are located, not on where you conduct business. So I never step foot in a particular state, but I have lots of customers there. I sell goods into that state. Those goods are taxable. I need to register with the state for sales tax purposes. I can't just collect the tax without registering and identifying myself, my business, and a responsible party associated with that business. I have to do that to begin to collect tax, or I'm doing it illegally, unlawfully. But as an agent of the state, I also have a responsibility. Whatever I collect on behalf of the state needs to go to that state. But I'm being asked to comply with a state that I've got no physical jurisdiction with. I just think it's important to recognize that. So sometimes it does give pause when somebody recognizes, wait a minute, I'm listed as a responsible party. I'm responsible to that state that I don't enter into. I'm not a taxpayer in that state. I don't get any benefit from that state except for I have customers there that are buying my product or receiving services on my behalf. But that responsible party aspect is super important. It shouldn't cause people to shy away from properly registering. But once you register, it's so important to recognize what your responsibility is in that state. So number one, when do I collect tax? From who? On what? Right? And if I collect tax, then I better remit it to the state, because I'm subject to unjust enrichment, as they call it, if I collect tax and don't remit it. We work with companies who do this innocently, not intentionally or fraudulently, and it's really important, the remedies and the processes by which you bring that forward to the state and make sure that you get that paid to the state. But this idea of responsible party is pretty significant, because the state has to have recourse against an individual, not just an entity, when it comes to non-compliance with their sales tax laws.
Yeah, it's
It
similar
also
to.
reminds me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Danny.
You're already going too far. You got to just keep
No.
going now, Paul.
It just reminds me that as we
Wait, no,
help
I'll go.
businesses.
I'll go. No, you can go. Go ahead, Paul.
It just reminds me of, as we help businesses get compliant and get registered, one of the things that the state will do is, as we try and contact the state and say, hey, we need to get an update on this account, or find out what's delinquent in this account, or how to access the online account for this taxpayer. Like the state itself is not going to disclose information about the business. Are they registered? What's their account number? That information, without disclosing it to the owner or officer of the business. And so you have to have some validating, verifiable information in order for the state to disclose that to you. In addition, when the state audits, they want to know who to reach out to audit the business. And so, hey, we're going to come and audit ABC company, and you're listed as the officer associated or responsible for sales tax. Who are they going to work with in the audit scenario? They just aren't going to work with just any Joe Blow. And if you're being audited, you certainly don't want, your AP department to handle the audit and disclose things that just aren't true. And so you want somebody listed as the owner or officer responsible for sales tax that truly has some overview, some oversight of the business, and can represent you well under audit as well. So there's a number of key factors that just go into why you want to be listed as a responsible party, or you don't want to be, and other people will want to be listed. It truly is up to each individual business.
I just want to soften what Paul said there. It's not that your AP department would give untrue information. It just might not be accurate, right? You just think about
Good representation,
words,
yeah,
and how they come across, right? If somebody is telling a falsehood or a lie, versus they may not have the context, so the information they provide might not be accurate. That's different than
that's a good point.
than saying something that's untrue. Paul, what's the deal with AP departments? You got an issue with AP departments? I mean, not all AP departments fight with the tax departments,
We love all of our AP friends.
100%.
Yeah. They might give too much information, which again, I like how the way you softened it, Par, and talked about, just a lack of context where, if an auditor comes, it's like, oh, they're asking for information. I better just give them everything they're asking for, right? We talk about this a lot as we discuss, a good, sound audit defense approach, and that, there's some things you don't need to provide to an auditor, especially when you're dealing with sales tax, right? So there's that piece. And I love where this conversation's ended up, where we're talking about protections for the company, right? Because oftentimes, in fact, where we started, where the question was concern that companies have for, information they're giving out, be it the social security number, and feeling like they want some more protection. Well, it does in fact provide protection. So, perspective's everything, of course. And something comes to mind is that although it's, not a friendship you want to create with the auditors, with the states, when you are doing business in their state, especially as you mentioned, Par, with the nexus rules now being based on, economic nexus and where your customers are based, even if you don't have a presence there in that state, you are essentially entering into a partnership now with that state that says,
Yep.
I'm going to do business in your state. I appreciate all that you've built in your state and, the way commerce works. And I'm going to go ahead and act as an agent of the state. And in doing so, right, there's an actual partnership, a mutual partnership agreement. And that's the way that it really is set up. And when you look at these requirements, right, oftentimes people will look at, even their cost of goods sold, right, and sourcing product and solutions and anything that they end up selling to the end user. And it's like people always say, it's the cost of doing business. Well, this isn't necessarily just the cost of doing business. It is the actual partnership that you're engaged in with your business. And, that even shines some light on why we, you could say, get so much fulfillment out of what we do in this sales tax space. Because, we always talk about how it's so complex. A lot of people go as far as, being blunt enough to say sales tax sucks. And then we oftentimes say we love sales tax. Well, it's not that we love sales tax in and of itself. It's that we love solving this problem. And when you look at it in this light of this true partnership with the business and the state, we really do act, within that space of helping these partnerships get created in the first place when they're supposed to be created, right? Based on nexus and, those responsibilities. And of course, managing that partnership. So the company is in fact freed up to do what they do best, right? And grow a successful business. And they don't need to worry about all the nuances and complexities of that partnership because the state is very demanding as a partner. So
Yeah.
we're happy to be in that
100%.
space.
You want to have a strong professional relationship with an auditor. To your point, you said, you don't necessarily want, they're not your friend, nor do you want them to be your friend. When you mentioned auditors, I just thought about, so often when somebody from a taxing jurisdiction shows up and says, hey, we want to audit your records to help you make sure that you're getting it right, they are definitely saying we want to identify any deficiencies you have in your system. We're not looking for credits and debits, or we're looking for where you didn't collect or you collected and didn't remit. But it reminded me of the story, and maybe y'all know the story. I can't paraphrase it very well because I don't know it that well, but I still want to share it. You climb to the top of this big hill, and you get to the top of the hill, and there's a snake up there. The snake is stuck. The snake just asks you to bring him down to the bottom of the hill so he can go on his merry way, whatever the case may be. And you're like, no, I'm not going to pick you up. You'll bite me. And the snake's like, no, I won't bite you. I just need to get down to the bottom so I can make it back home, whatever the story goes. But you have this interaction back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then the person finally decides to pick the snake up and carry it down the hill. And as they're walking down the hill and they get close to the bottom, the snake bites them. I thought you said you weren't going to bite me. And then the snake says, hey, you knew what I was when you picked me up.
Yeah.
So if you have an auditor coming in to audit you It's valuable to remember that they're an auditor and they're there on behalf of the state to identify any deficiencies or noncompliance. And you don't need to make friends, but you do need to be friendly, right? And you need to be able to provide information that they ask you for, but you don't need to volunteer lots of information that's not requested or asked for.
Right.
And you might even want to hold back on information that they request. You might just want to give us a call and have a quick chat and say, hey, the auditor is asking for this very long, extensive list of information. Do I have to provide all of this? Well, you don't always have to provide everything that the auditor is requesting. So there's some value in gaining some support to understand what's required and what needs to be provided, and some context on why the auditor might be asking for that, so that you don't have lots of friendly conversations along the way, and then at the exit interview they give you the sheet of paper that has a 7-figure assessment on it.
Bam.
And then you're like, I thought we were getting along, right? Oh, you knew what I was when I walked in the door. You always want to remember who these people are, who they represent.
We don't need to make friends with auditors, and we can be friendly with them when, we are faced with the interaction with them. But even then, we don't need to be their friend or stay their friend.
100%.
Hold on a
100%.
second. How are we going to
Because
soften
Paul
this
always
one, Par?
says, Paul always says, you can't trust your AP department. They could be untruthful.
And we can't trust auditors because Par just called them snakes. And I don't know how we're going to soften that one.
Listen, there's a lot of really great people that work for states and audit companies. And what I can tell you about them is they may have a great personality, and they're people that you can be friends with and be friendly with. But they're also oftentimes really good at what they do and identifying deficiencies. I'm just saying, if they give you the mindset that they're there to identify potential overpayments and underpayments, or under collections or over collections, they're really there for anything that's under collected, under remitted, underreported. States are looking for dollars. Remember, like Paul always says, state laws don't make sense when it comes to sales tax. That's because they're about making dollars.
All the Parisms are turning into Paulisms.
This is true.
Just like that. Just like you can leave the snake at the top of the mountain, you can leave the auditor in their own space, and send the information you need to the top of the mountain, but you don't need to go hang out with them, and you certainly don't need to take them down the mountain with you.
Yeah, you don't need to pick them up. Don't pick up the auditor. That's awkward. That's uncomfortable.
You can hug the auditor if the auditor is your mom.
I was just going to say you never hug an auditor, but I actually am in agreement. If the auditor is your mom, then you can hug them.
And hopefully if mom is auditing you, she'll be nice.
Oh, it's going to be the worst audit you've ever been through. It's going to be very detailed.
But then she'll turn around on LinkedIn and praise the work that you're doing with your business.
There you go.
Thanks for hanging out with us on the Sales Tax People podcast. If you want to talk about sales tax, or maybe you have an experience that goes along with something we talked about today, or maybe you just want to hear about how Paul's day is going, make sure you send us an email to podcast@sales.tax, or you can text us at 949-355-5098. See y'all again soon.